Hi, everyone, and welcome to the House of Lou podcast. I'm your host, Veronica Theodoro. This episode of House of Lou is sponsored by the Repertory Theater of St. Louis. Today, I'm talking to Marcella Hawley, a botanical illustrator and creative director who's worked at both Martha Stewart Living and the Mary Engelbreit Home Companion. Some of you may know Marcella through her glorious front garden in Webster Groves, which she planted with thousands of flowers, including tulips and daffodils of all colors and species in honor of her mother. Marcella named the garden the Slope of Possibility, and it's central to her belief that plants and gardens are a force for personal transformation and healing. We're going to talk to her about all of this today and much more, including the latest news from Marcella on what she's planning next. I can't wait to get started on my conversation, but first, here's what's been going on in and around my house. I just got back from a whirlwind weekend in New York City with my daughter. She was on her fall break from college, so we decided to meet in the city. Of course, we did a ton of shopping, and Fabi got her hair cut at the very fancy Sally Hirschberger salon on the Upper East Side. We also made it a point to visit a few places neither of us had ever been to before. I'm a big fan of the Colombian fashion designer, Joana Ortiz. I knew that she had opened a new boutique on Madison Avenue, and I just had to see it for myself. The shop is so beautifully designed with like palm trees and natural materials, but the salespeople, I think, are the real stars. They were so charming and welcoming, which isn't always the case at these very, high-end boutiques. But I thought that they really embodied the spirit of the clothes. When I mentioned to one of them how much I love the brand, he offered to show me the dressing room lounge, even though I wasn't buying or trying on anything really that day. I'll be sure to post a few photos of the rooms because it's a real knockout. It's covered in floor to ceiling, crimson palm tree wall covering and matching chairs. The wall covering and the fabric are part of a larger collaboration with Schumacher that was announced, ironically, 2 days before I walked into the shop. It includes 4 wall coverings, 6 fabrics, and 1 tasseled trim. So check it out if you, like me, love Joana Ortiz. The other place we went to was the New York School of Interior Design. I wanted to see the exhibit, The Persistence of Hand Drawing Interior Rendering Today. And I was not disappointed. The attention to detail in these renderings were absolutely magnificent. It's a real reminder of the artistry that designers and architects used, and some still use, to communicate their vision and their ideas to their clients. The exhibit is up through April of 2025. So if you're interested and happen to be in New York, I highly recommend it. We'll be right back. This December, the Repertory Theater of St. Louis and Stages St. Louis present $1 Million Quartet Christmas. Join Elvis Presley, Johnny Cash, Jerry Lee Lewis, and Carl Perkins for a rock and roll celebration. Don't miss the Black Friday super sale on tickets and keep an eye out for $1 million Cyber Monday deal. Visit repstl.org to swing into your holiday season. Now, on to my interview with Marcella. Hi, Marcella.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning. It's so nice to see you.
Fantastic to be here.
Marcella has brought me the most beautiful bud vase arrangement. Let's talk a little bit about the flowers and what you included from your garden, I imagine.
Mhm.
Okay.
So looking out my back door, I checked to see what was in bloom, and we have an abundance of Begonia grandis, which is a native plant with a cascade of really luscious little pink flowers. And actually, as they go to seed, they turn a very cool kind of rosy brown. That is one of my favorite colors, and it fills with seeds. And so if you let that dry in that vase, you can sprinkle those around and you'll get these flowers too. So
Oh,
just let them die back.
okay. Spread the seeds
Yeah, you
outside.
can just sprinkle them
Sprinkle
outside,
them outside.
and
Oh,
they
okay.
might just start up. It likes shade. It likes dry shade, which is kind of an anomaly in
Okay.
the plant world. But that notwithstanding, they have amazing leaves, and it's just one of my favorite plants. There is also Japanese anemone, which blooms in the fall, and lavender that I added for scent. And this is a euphorbia blackbird, which matches your sweater.
I love it. And I did dress for you. I said, I have to have lilac on today or purple or pink.
You look fantastic, and I'm wearing black because artists wear black.
Well, I'd like to start by talking about your garden, which I know from lots of photos on social media is very colorful and vibrant this past spring and summer, and clearly still going strong. Have you always been a gardener?
I think I was a reluctant gardener at first. My mother is a huge gardener in Kirkwood. When I was in high school, she really started just transforming our entire yard into a garden with my stepdad. And she would try to infuse me, teach me, lead me through the garden, try to teach me the plant names and things. And I was more interested in boys and skateboarding and music and all that stuff because I was a teenager. But I realized later that a lot of that knowledge osmosed to me. And as soon as I had an apartment, I was doing balcony gardens with herbs and pots and window boxes and things like that. So
And now you have your own garden at your home in
Yeah.
Webster Groves that you have named the Slope of Possibility, which is just such a beautiful name. But the story behind how that garden came to be is so interesting. And I'd love for you to share a little bit about that.
We've been in this house for about 25 years, and I did start a garden. Let's see, my daughter's 22 now. So I started when I was 5 months pregnant with her in the backyard. And that was just a very private, kind of confined space. And I dug up, flower beds and did put in a garden back there. But over the course of, pretty much as soon as I gave birth to her, I was still working full time for Mary Inglebright's Home Companion
Yeah.
as the art director there. I was so busy and I had
Right.
no idea what was about to come with having children and stuff. So that garden started out really amazing and then ended up becoming just like a wild country. I ended up going through a divorce several years later and then fell into my next relationship with Doug, who I'm married to. And that garden just was like the last thing on my mind. And my husband called it a terrarium because it was just so overgrown and shaded and filled with plants. So that was sort of the extent of the gardening. And I wasn't able to deal with that really. Then my mother passed away from breast cancer in 2016. And gardening was really the last thing on my mind. I was missing my mother terribly. She had been my best friend, my encourager, and my support through everything in life. And to have lost her, I just kind of trudged forward and kept doing all the things. And one night I was getting kind of nostalgic for her, as I often did, but I ended up pouring a glass of wine and paging through an online bulb catalog with daffodils and tulips. So I started thinking, well, maybe I'll get a few of these and maybe I'll get a few lorikeet. And I remember how she loved that one. There was one called Gin and Lime that had a really wonderful kind of greenish yellow cup. And I thought, well, I'll get a couple of those. Anyway, I ended up drinking an entire bottle of wine and getting very, add to cart, add to cart, add to cart.
Right.
And then the next morning I woke up and I looked in my inbox and realized I had ordered 3,000 bulbs.
Do you remember the name of the catalog that you ordered from?
Oh, yeah. Brent and Becky's
okay.
bulbs,
Okay.
which is in Gloucester, Virginia.
Okay.
That was really the catalyst. I had to find a place to put them. But I knew from my past experience, my mother's daffodil obsession, that the bulbs do not ship until the fall. So I had a few months. I had to do research. I had to talk to people who knew more than I did. I sought out Jason Delaney, who was at the time the bulb curator at the Missouri Botanical Garden.
Okay.
And he was a good friend of my mother's. He's in the Daffodil Society as well. I started reaching out to other friends of my mother's who were in the gardening community. I had my own resources in gardening just from years of working at a magazine. And I really just started kind of planning it out. But honestly, I had no intention of digging up my entire front yard, which is what ended up happening over the course of the next several years. Of course, I dug up every square inch and created this insane garden filled with way more than 3,000
Wow.
bulbs.
Wow. And so during the COVID years, you had a little bit more time because you were working from home, I imagine.
Yes. So the first year, so that was 2018 when I first put in the bulbs.
Okay.
And then you are starting to realize, oh my gosh, these daffodils bloom in April, May, tulips finish blooming, and then you have to have something else to take their place. So I realized this is not just a one-time, plant it and get it done. You have to take an active role in determining how you want that area to look and what is going to supplement it. And so it forced me to start paying attention, which was important at the time. My attention was not there. My attention was scattered everywhere with everyone else. So by 2020, we were in the second year of bloom of the garden. And by then I had planted thousands more daffodils, tulips, peonies. I just started really kind of having a sense of the realization that death is real. My mother had died in 2017. I also got breast cancer. So my mother had died from breast cancer. I had breast cancer. And I'm doing well now, but I just a real sense of life is short, plant the peonies. And when we had lockdown, I mean, the whole world was in such confusion and upheaval. I was so grateful to have that garden. It was so grounding to be able to have this kind of sanctuary amidst this pain and confusion and worry. I would go out there every single morning and see my neighbors. It allowed not just a beauty and a sense of life, but there was connection happening between, me, the plants, the memory of my mother coming up in these daffodils that were blooming. It was April when we had the lockdown, so the daffodils were in their glory. And to be able to see neighbors who couldn't go to the botanical garden anymore because it closed.
They must have loved being able to walk by your house.
They did. They made it a priority.
And we should say, I mean, this front garden, the slope in front of your home, I mean, it is filled, it's brimming with vibrancy and color. And what a gift to give to your neighbors and to yourself, of course, but to your neighbors and the people who walk by. You've talked about, the garden being a path to healing. And I'm wondering why you think that gardening can be so transformative.
I really didn't start out thinking about it that way at all, but realized it's a transformation of your surroundings. And if you let it be, it can be a transformation for self. The beauty, the access to the cycle of life that it affords you when you take the time to notice gives you a window into life that is not something that I think we're taught. So what if you take time to watch the flower emerge, burst through the ground? What if you take time to notice how the leaves unfurl and in what pattern, and how the texture of one plant emerging, a few weeks later kind of mingles with that first plant, and the relationships that are, the universe, the earth is creating this world. You've planted some things together, so you're creating sort of your own artistic expression, and I've realized it's a co-creation of God and the source of life and man. And so we use our gifts, the earth gives their gifts, and that intersection, I think that transformation can just infuse everything that you are. It takes time. It takes exposure. It doesn't happen overnight. But I do feel like physical work, the involvement that is imperative. You have to shovel wheelbarrows full of mulch and compost, and you have to get out the pruners and be out there in the hot sun or the cold. And being a part of that process, it teaches you so much about the cycle of life, and that there is beginning and there's blossoming and a fertile, ripe stage, and there is a dying back. And there is a time where there's nothing for for perennials, at least in this area. And to know that though there's hope for something else to happen.
Do you think that any of us can tap into those healing qualities that we find in nature or in a garden?
You know, I would not have seen myself like
Really?
this. I was not really like this. And it's changed me. But I think it's totally accessible to everyone, you know, and you've heard people say like, oh, just get out and take a walk when you're stressed and it sort of resets you. Well, that is true, but I do think it's repeated exposure to nature. And it is, I think, in solitude, allowing yourself solitude, gifting yourself solitude to be in nature and notice and observe where the magic kind of happens. I think wonder is a quality that a lot of us kind of outgrow, and it's not nurtured really in a lot of professions.
I'm curious, what are some of the more common questions or reactions that you get from customers?
They ask, how do I weed all of it? And my answer is that if you plant enough beautiful things that they fill in to such an extent that the weeds can't even find a house. It can't get started really because there's just too much good stuff.
And what a great metaphor for life, right? Yes, fill your life with good things. The bad things will stay at bay.
So right. That is so good. They ask, how do I do it all? And honestly, it did change my life. So I won't lie about that. I no longer have the time to sit at my desk all day. I've planted up this whole thing. It needs caretaking. Now we're 6 years down the line. Things are getting more established. They ask, how do I water?
And do you have automatic water?
No.
No. Okay. It's all you.
I had no plan. I didn't put in soaking hoses or anything like that. I'm out there with a hose or a sprinkler, which again is, I think, another aspect of to be present. Try to not rush through things, which
is more difficult to do than it sounds, right?
Oh, it is.
I think that goes back to the practice, the doing over and over.
You know, make sure that your garden is tended and looks amazing for all these people who come by, or looks amazing just for you because you want it to be at its healthiest and best. The time that you need to put into that you might want to outsource and have, a landscaping company come in. I think it is in the doing that the magic happens. Giving yourself that time, that solitude, that grit, the dirt in your fingernails, the changing out of your clothes. I am out there in the fall and winter with a headlamp on until 8 and 9 o'clock planting bulbs, because that's the time you plant and it gets dark earlier.
Okay.
So, I mean, all of that has been part of who I am. I think if I just had picked out the plants and had someone come and plant them and, good.
Yeah, not the same.
Yeah, not the same. It would be like going to a
botanical garden.
I've planted things that have meaning to me, and honestly, like my garden is like an art, a canvas, and it is art. And I didn't think about it that way. People had to start telling me, "Oh, your garden is art. You are an artist. This is an expression of you." Because I'm just doing what I do. I don't really think about it that way, but in time, I've sort of reflected back on it and realized, oh my gosh, it really is. I am creating swaths of color and a succession of plants that will enhance the theme that I'm hoping to imbue in a certain area. And the best part about it is it's all an experiment. You know, I don't really know what I'm doing. And that is also part of the healing and transformation process, learning about something that is not in your daily regimen. It allows your brain to start expanding. It allows your heart to start expanding, your spirituality to start expanding. And when you're in the need for transformation, you need expansion. You need to see bigger possibilities. And I think with plants and gardening and the combinations and the playfulness and the experimentation that the gardening involves. It kind of just reminds you things are so much bigger than what you.
Than that moment in time. You've described yourself as high energy, high achieving person. Did it take time for you to adjust to nature's pace?
Oh, yes. Like I said, I'm a totally different person. I'm still a go-getter. I don't think you can take that out of me. I wouldn't want to. But um, being a high achieving person, I feel like that your own needs and your own health are often the very last thing.
Absolutely.
You know,
Yep.
you're helping everyone else. You're doing all the things you think you're supposed to be doing and doing them well, or at least the best of your ability, which, in my world, I want to do everything amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I come to expect that of myself, not in a mean way, but in a, I want everything to be awesome
Of course.
for
No, I
everyone.
understand. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so um it wasn't until, really like we touched on 2020. I'm just gonna say that like I realized alcohol had become a really big part of my day. Like it was at 5 o'clock, I was like pouring that glass of wine every day for years, just habitually. And it wasn't until I guess the end of 2020, I decided to participate in something called the alcohol experiment, put on by a woman named Annie Grace, who started something called This Naked Mind. And it really allows you to examine how big a role alcohol is taking in your life, in your mind, in your, when do you start thinking about getting to pour that glass of wine, that kind of thing. And I realized like, oh my gosh, I really am relying on that as a way to turn off my brain um, because of feeling so overwhelmed and responsible for so many things. And I mean, really from the outside world, everybody would say like, Marcy has the perfect life. I had a job I absolutely love. I was in the process of building a company called Power Poppy, which is an online crafting community based around my botanical drawings. And that was fulfilling. I've married the man of my dreams. I have 4 incredible children, darling house, now this garden. And yet I'm needing to drink wine every night. That was a sign that something was
Right.
off.
Right.
And so through the course of first month of 2020, I experimented with not drinking and really looking at my behaviors of what was leading to that and doing journaling and being involved in this online community that was mostly women. So anyways, I was able to really switch everything about my life, like stopping drinking. It's now been over 4.5 years, and I would not change anything about that.
Do you think that people can derive that same satisfaction in healing from caring for houseplants?
The thing about houseplants, of course, you're caring for them, you're nurturing them, they become your babies. They are green all the time, or they are alive all the seasons. What an outdoor garden teaches you, at least in this climate, is the withering and the death and the renewal, and how that cycle can be applied to your own experience, and
Oh,
that it's natural to feel a withering. It's natural to have death. It's natural to have a rebirth as
yeah.
well. And so houseplants are awesome. They're gorgeous. I love the vitality that they bring to space. I have them in every room. Some of them are fake.
They're making really good fake
They
things
are
these
making
days.
such good face. So it's like, yeah, resist.
What are your tips for successful bulb gardening? Do you have any secrets that you can share with our
Oh, yeah.
audience
I have a few secrets. One is order way more than you
than you
think.
think?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're going to wish you had planted more. And there are online sources where you can buy them in bulk. I can give you
Yes. Yeah.
Van Engelen Nursery, which is on the East Coast. They import from Holland. A lot of them are imported from Holland. Dutch Grown is another one I like. And you can buy hundreds and hundreds of daffodils at a time, and you get a big discount. And then I feel like the even more wonderful thing about ordering them in bulk is when you have extras, you give them to your neighbors. And then, as I've realized, now we have multiple neighbors who have similar
Oh,
plants, and it does kind of
nice.
create a nice little alley of
Yes.
a miniature little Holland feeling. But buying in bulk is good. Buying specialty daffodils from really good sources, PHS daffodils is a fantastic one. Q daffs is another one I love. The
Okay.
letter Q. John Sheepers is an awesome nursery. Color Blends is one where you can get lots of the in bulk and really good varieties. But learning the most you can about bulbs is imperative if you want succession of blooms. So if
Okay.
you only get one variety, the Triumph tulips, for example, they all bloom at pretty much the same time. And so you want to learn about what are the early blooming, what are the mid season blooms,
Okay.
what are the late season blooms. That way you can have an extended amount of time.
And what are some sources for learning about tulips, for example?
I would say seek out mentors in all gardening,
Okay.
in anything really, but,
Yes.
you know, learning from people who are one step ahead, two steps ahead, read every magazine that you can get your hands on, go visit the gardens in spring and take pictures for successful gardening because you can learn about what combinations work well together. You can learn about how grassy the foliage is or how big, some tulips have really big leaves that might flop over and not look like what you want. There might be a variety very similar in color that has more stayed leaves and
Okay.
isn't going to cover up the other plants and things like that. But
Yeah.
you only find that out from doing research and kind of really nerding out,
Yeah.
which, so nerding out, that's a big tip. Here is something super cool that I learned about when I went to England at Great Dixter, which is incredible garden that had been the estate of Christopher Lloyd, who's a huge
Oh,
name in gardening, especially in England. But it is now run by Fergus Garrett, who's their head gardener. Fantastic. So he has the people who operate that garden order at least a dozen of all different kinds of tulips. Like, so say they think they want to do an area with different purples and blues of tulips. So they will trial the tulips pots the year before
Oh.
they're going to plant them. And then they observe. They put a dozen in one pot, a dozen in another pot, a dozen in another pot, and leave them outside over winter. Or I guess in a sheltered place, you'd want it to be, you don't want the pot to crack, but, and then they observe them the next spring and they take notes on how tall did it get. So they trial them ahead of time. And then after they bloom, they have taken notes about the heights and the spread and how the double flower really is a double or whatever. They get these minute characteristics noted. And then they only order the ones that have the characteristics that they really want for the following year.
Sure.
A very basic must do if you're going to get
Ooh.
super into planting bulbs is
Yes.
getting a drill outfitted with an auger bit, which is like a spiral on the end. Jason Delaney, who had been curator of the bulb gardens at the Botanical Garden for 20 years. This was his piece of advice to me when I first ordered that 3,000 bulbs. And
Ooh, love it.
like, what have I done? Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. And he said, okay, well, you're going to get this drill. He recommended a De Steel drill that was like professional grade, and I didn't have the budget for it then. So I just got one from Home Depot and I still have it. 6 years later, it was like $100 with an auger bit. Now they have something called a power planter that you can get at Home Depot that is an auger. And basically you get a cordless drill. You can plant a hole in seconds, 6 to 8
smart.
inches down for a tulip, or I guess 4 to 6. A daffodil, you want to really go down deeper. So 8 to 10 inches.
Okay.
Depending on the size of the bulb. You can read all this online when you do your research. But the fact that you can just put them anywhere. It's
so
fun.
fast
It
and
is fun.
easy.
And it's fast. It's easy. You tromp through your yard and create little pathways of, that phrase swaths of color. You can create waves of different colors with this drill and then
you
a
can
layer.
see it, I'm sure, to a certain
You
extent.
can see it sort of. I mean, I take a lot of pictures that end up looking like, later I look at it and it's a photograph of dirt basically. But what I do is I bring them all into my iPad and I will sketch out what
Oh my
was
gosh.
where. I mean, I've got a whole, I'm a nut.
Yeah, sounds like you've got a really incredible system.
I've got a system, but it doesn't have to be like that. I mean, if you approach gardening and life that everything is an experiment, it's an experiment. And what happens if you plant a couple hundred bulbs and they come out and they're not the right color? I mean, you don't have to trial them like they do at Great Dixter. Who cares? It's still a tulip.
Yes.
And if it's not the color you wanted, go out and snip them and put them in a vase and bring them inside or give them to your grandma. Like it's just fun. It's an opportunity to give yourself this experience.
You are embarking, or you perhaps already have launched, a new business venture that's called Vivopolis. What can you tell us about it?
Thank you for asking. I'm preparing to launch in January 25 an online community for women who are seeking a change. I'm targeting high achieving women, but really aren't all women to some degree high achieving.
Thank you.
So, women who are ready to explore a reset and a reevaluation of their lives and essentially a rejuvenation. What else is inside me that wants to get out? I want women to have a safe place to explore possibilities for their next phase of life. So this community will offer activities and online gatherings and classes and, exercises, challenges to help them grow, to help them heal, to help them see things differently, create new habits that maybe serve them better than the ways that we were raised. I'm not trying to dog the way everything that we were raised with, but I find myself trying to unlearn a lot of what I learned.
Will gardening and nature play a role?
For sure. Gardening and nature, I mean, they are intrinsic to my transformation, so I couldn't not talk about them. But I don't think everyone has to become a gardener by any stretch. I think healing through nature is such a simple thing to do. It's free to go outside and observe. You certainly do not have to dig up your entire front yard. You do not have to do that. I would not do that to anyone. With Vivopolis, I want to help create this community of women so that we can talk to each other and teach one another. I'm not doing this alone. I have been reaching out to women, to men, to people who know more than I do, who are maybe just one step ahead of this process than I am.
Right?
Yes, we have to mentor each other. We have to encourage each other. Throughout my career, I have been creating communities. With Martha Stewart, we were creating communities of women who wanted to beautify their lives, their homes, elevating homemaking to this art and entertaining and cooking and all these things. Before that, I was super into skateboarding, and the communities that I found in skateboarding, it's still part of my life. So I feel like finding community, finding people who have a shared interest in acknowledgement, in validation, in growth, in feeling, I don't know, elevated together in a shared purpose is just like magical.
Yeah.
I can be the facilitator for that. I built with Mary Engelbright a community of people who celebrated art in their lives. She showed a powerful woman to me, like a woman who figured out what she wanted to do and just against all odds kind of went for it. I feel like I want to create that change. I want to help women feel that way.
Love it.
And
where can people go online to learn more about Vivopolis?
So this point where I'm still building it, marcellahawley.com is my personal website, and I will have links to it there.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. This was so much fun, and I've just loved meeting you and talking with you.
I can't tell you what a thrill it was to meet with you, and I hope you'll plant some of these begonias.
I'm really going to try.
And if you don't, who cares? It's an experiment.
We'll be right back. Join the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra for a celebration of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart during 2 weekends of captivating concerts. Catch the magic on November 9th and 10th at the Stifel Theater and November 15th and 16th at UMSL's Tuil Performing Arts Center. Each performance offers a unique glimpse into the life and legacy of one of classical music's greatest composers. Get tickets now at slso.org. And now on to V's Views. Have you heard about Fennel Cooking School on Olive and Midtown? My neighbor sent me a link to the website recently, and I was so excited to see all the offerings. In November alone, you can sign up for everything from French to Colombian and Brazilian cooking classes, plus, as you can imagine, a whole host of offerings just in time for the Thanksgiving holiday. I'm going to post a story that my colleague Cheryl Bear from the dining team recently wrote about St. Louis's top cooking and mixology classes. So be sure to take a look at that. On Tuesday, November 19th, from 4 to 5 p.m., the Webster University Speaker Series welcomes Shelley Niemeyer of Space Architects, Designers, and Builders. Shelley's presentation is called Reimagining Home, Design for All Ages and Abilities. It's free and open to the public, but be sure to register, and we'll have that link for you in our show notes. Lastly, our podcast guest today will be sharing her personal story and journey to healing through gardening at the studio at Bowood on November 30th from 2 to 3 p.m. So if you'd like to hear more from Marcella and perhaps meet her in person, be sure to sign up for that class. I know you're going to love hearing more from her. That's it for us today. Thanks for listening to the House of Lou podcast. Be sure to follow us and share the episodes with your friends. Be in touch. Subscribe to our design and home newsletter at stlmag.com/newsletters and follow along on Instagram at St. Louis Mag. You can follow me at VT Lookbook. If you loved what you heard, show us some love by rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you choose to listen. We'll see you next time. And just remember, there's so much to see in St. Louis if you know where to look.